In this video, we're looking at the behavioral perspective in psychology. It's an important perspective in this discipline, and it has been there for some time and has had tremendous impact on research and scholarship. So let's take a closer look at this very important perspective. Unlike the other perspectives, it is focused on behaviors, right? So the behavioral, as the name suggests, the behavioral perspective, of course, is focused on behaviors that we observe, right? So behaviors that we observe. So this is us right here, and behaviors that we observe. And that observation does not require us to use mental processes. The observation does not require us to use mental processes such as thinking, memory, retrieving, and things along those lines. It doesn't require us to use those processes. That's behavioral perspective in a nutshell. And we observe these behaviors, and we don't think about the behaviors. We don't commit them to memory. We don't have to retrieve them, right? Because we are just observing, right? So this reiterates the point that learning is instrumental to controlling and influencing all behaviors. Let me say this again, because this is a very important point of this perspective. This reiterates the point that learning is instrumental to controlling and influencing all behaviors. So essentially saying that learning is so critical, learning is so pivotal, learning is so central, right, to controlling, to our ability to control and influence our behaviors. And we learn by observing. So let's take this again. The behavioral perspective is an important perspective of psychology. Unlike other perspectives, it is focused on behaviors we observe, right? And those behaviors, once again, right, this is us, we're observing, right? We're observing, but the observation doesn't require us to use our mental capacity. That's essentially what it is. It says here, do not need us to apply mental processes such as thinking, memory, retrieving, etc. This reiterates the point that learning is instrumental to controlling and influencing our behaviors, right? So when we learn, we are able to understand behaviors, dissect behaviors, analyze behaviors, and we're able to learn about those behaviors, and we're able to control and influence behaviors. That's what this is saying. Right, so this perspective holds that only behaviors we can see are observable, right? Anything within our sights. This is us once again. Anything within our sights, right? Anything within our sights we can learn, right? Only behaviors we can see are observable and not mental processes are observable. Of course, we don't see the behaviors, we cannot observe them, right? We cannot observe those behaviors. All right, so let's take a look at this again. This perspective holds that only behaviors we can see are observable and not mental processes, right? Of course, we don't observe mental processes, we don't commit them to memory, we don't think about them and so forth. We just simply observe. And by observing, we are learning. And by observing, we are taking in, right? So this is the work of J.B. Watson, right? And J.B. Watson is a famous psychologist who introduced the idea of behavioralism. He was influenced by the work of Ivan Pavlov, a famous psychologist, right? So Watson is of the belief that observable behaviors can be used to measure human behavior. And that is the bottom line here. And this is the main point here, that we observe behaviors, and that observation allows us to measure human behavior, allows us to determine human behavior, allows us to measure, on one hand, determine, right? Allows us to determine, allows us to analyze and make conclusions, right? Conclusions about human behavior. Observation allows us to do all of this. So this is the behavioral perspective. It is focused on behaviors that we observe. Once again, we do not need to apply mental processes such as thinking, memories, retrieving, right? It just simply emphasizes the point that learning is instrumental to controlling and influencing our behaviors, right? So when we learn, right? So learning, all right, over control. That's what it is, right? So learning over control. It is focused on behaviors we observe that we do not need to apply mental processes such as thinking, memories, and retrieving. And this reiterates the point that learning is instrumental to controlling and influencing all behaviors. And then it says the perspective holds that only behaviors we can see, right? Behaviors we can see are observable and not mental processes, right? And of course, if you don't see them, there is no observation. And this is the work of J.B. Watson, who was influenced by Ivan Pavlov, a famous psychologist. And then finally it says here, Watson is of the belief that observable behavior can be used to measure human behavior. And that is the bottom line. And that is the core point here of behavioral perspective, a very important perspective in psychology.